Most people think their personality is simply who they are. The responsible one, the quiet one, the funny one, the peacemaker, the invisible one, the successful one, the child who learned to need nothing. But what if some of the behaviors you call your personality are actually roles you learned much earlier? Roles you never consciously chose. Maybe you became responsible because nobody else seemed to be. Maybe you became funny because making people laugh kept the tension away. Maybe you became quiet because speaking never felt safe. Maybe you became successful because achievement was the only way to feel noticed. At first, these roles helped you survive, belong, or be accepted. But then childhood ended. The role didn't. And years later, you may still be performing it without realizing it, at work, in relationships, even when you're completely alone. So, here's the question. If your childhood role helped you adapt to your family, what happens when you continue playing that role long after childhood is over? Because the answer may reveal something unsettling. You may not just be living your personality. You may still be living your childhood. Every child enters the world with needs, emotions, and an instinct to belong. But no child grows up in an emotional vacuum. Children learn quickly what gets attention, what creates safety, what causes conflict, what must be hidden. And slowly, often without anyone telling them directly, they begin adapting to the emotional environment around them. One child learns that being helpful keeps the peace. Another learns that being funny makes them lovable. Another learns that staying quiet makes them safe. Another discovers that achievement brings approval. And over time, these adaptations become automatic. What once began as a response to the environment slowly becomes an identity. The child no longer thinks, "I act this way because I need to adapt." Instead, they think, "This is just who I am." And that is where the deeper psychological problem begins. Because a learned emotional pattern can follow someone into adulthood, shaping their relationships, decisions, reactions, ambitions, and even their sense of self. The responsible child may become the adult who cannot ask for help. The quiet child may become the adult whose voice disappears. So the real question is not simply what role did you play? It's this: why did a child ever need to become a certain version of themselves in the first place? Family environments rarely sit children down and assign them a role. Nobody says, "You will be the responsible one. You will be the quiet one. You will keep everyone happy." It happens much more silently than that. A child watches. They notice who receives attention, what causes conflict, which emotions are welcomed, and which ones make people uncomfortable. They learn what is rewarded, what is ignored, and what feels unsafe. And slowly, they adapt. In one family, being useful may bring approval. In another, being quiet may prevent conflict. Somewhere else, perfection may become the safest way to avoid criticism. A child might learn that entertaining others makes them valuable, that being strong means hiding pain, or that becoming emotionally invisible makes life easier for everyone around them. These roles are rarely formed through conscious choice. They are learned through repetition. The child tries something. The environment responds. The child repeats what seems to work, again and again, until adaptation becomes familiar. And familiarity slowly becomes identity. Eventually, the child stops thinking, "I learned to behave this way." They begin thinking, "This is just my personality." But this raises an uncomfortable possibility. What if some of the traits you have spent your entire life calling who I am were originally emotional strategies, ways of surviving, belonging, receiving approval, or staying safe? Because once a role becomes familiar enough, you no longer simply perform it. You begin believing it is you. The family you grew up in may be gone. The people around you may have changed. The childhood situations that shaped you may no longer exist. But the rules you learned inside them can remain active. That is how a childhood role quietly follows someone into adulthood. The responsible child may grow into an adult who struggles to ask for help because somewhere inside, needing others still feels unfamiliar. The peacemaker may avoid disagreement, even in healthy relationships, because conflict once felt dangerous. The invisible child may feel uncomfortable taking up space, speaking too loudly, or simply being noticed. The successful child may achieve one goal after another, yet never feel that they are enough. Achievement becomes more than ambition. It becomes proof of worth. And the entertainer may become the person everyone loves being around while privately hiding emotions behind humor, jokes, and a constant need to keep the atmosphere light. On the surface, these behaviors can look like ordinary personality traits, but underneath, they may follow an older emotional logic. A person is not necessarily reacting to the room they are standing in today. Sometimes, they're following rules they learned in a room that no longer exists. Rules like, be useful, don't need too much, don't upset anyone, stay strong, make people happy. And that is the paradox. The role may have protected you when you were young. It may have helped you belong, avoid pain, or receive acceptance. But what once protected you can quietly begin limiting you, because a strategy that made sense in childhood may not always serve the person you have become. The hidden cost of a childhood role is that even when it becomes exhausting, letting go of it can feel strangely dangerous, because the mind often mistakes familiarity for safety. A role can continue long after its original purpose has ended simply because it is familiar. You know how to be the responsible one. You know how to keep everyone happy. You know how to achieve, stay quiet, stay strong, or hide what you need. And somewhere deep inside, abandoning that role may feel like losing something essential. Maybe you fear losing approval. Maybe you fear losing your place among other people. Maybe you fear losing control. Or maybe the deeper fear is this: if I'm not this person, who am I? That is why what once protected the child can begin isolating the adult. What once earned love can become pressure. What once avoided conflict can now prevent real intimacy. The person who never asks for help may feel alone. The person who never disappoints anyone may quietly resent everyone. The person who always succeeds may never feel free to fail. And the person who keeps the peace may never feel safe enough to be completely honest. The problem is no longer simply the role itself. It is the unconscious belief beneath it that life will somehow become unsafe if the role is no longer performed. And this is the central realization. Changing behavior is difficult when that behavior is not just a habit. It is protecting an identity. Because letting go of the role can feel like more than change. It can feel like losing yourself. The goal is not to look back at your childhood role and decide that none of it was ever real. It probably was. The responsible child may genuinely be responsible. The funny one may truly love humor. The quiet one may naturally prefer silence. The successful one may genuinely enjoy achievement. A childhood role is not necessarily a false personality. The deeper question is whether you can choose those traits freely, or whether, somewhere inside, you feel compelled to perform them even when they are no longer needed. Can the responsible person ask for help? Can the peacemaker allow someone to be disappointed? Can the invisible person take up space without feeling guilty? Can the successful person rest without needing to earn it? Can the entertainer be sad without turning the moment into a joke? These questions reveal something important. Your role may be part of who you are, but it should not be the only version of you that is allowed to exist. So begin noticing what you automatically become around other people. Who do you become when someone needs something? Who do you become when there is conflict? Who do you become when you feel ignored? And perhaps most importantly, what do you fear would happen if you stopped? Because healing does not begin by rejecting the child who adapted. That child was doing the best they could with what they understood. Healing begins with understanding why the role was necessary, and then recognizing something the child could not always recognize. You have more choices now. You can still be responsible without carrying everything. You can still bring peace without silencing yourself. You can still succeed without confusing achievement with worth. The freedom begins when adaptation stops feeling like destiny, because you are more than the role that once helped you survive. Maybe the most powerful realization is this: you may not need to keep proving that you are the person your childhood taught you to become. The responsible one can rest. The quiet one can speak. The strong one can ask for help. The peacemaker can disagree. The successful one can stop performing for approval. And the invisible one can finally take up space. None of this means rejecting the child you once were. That role existed for a reason. It may have helped you belong. It may have protected you. It may have carried you through moments when becoming a certain version of yourself felt necessary. You can honor that role without allowing it to define the rest of your life. Because the person you became to survive is not necessarily the only person you are allowed to be. And perhaps freedom begins with a simple question. What role did you play growing up? The responsible one? The funny one? The quiet one? The peacemaker? The invisible one? And are you still performing that role today? Even when no one is asking you to. Maybe you are not losing yourself by letting go of it. Maybe, for the first time, you are finally discovering who you are without having to perform.